The flow of the Genesis narrative has been an interactive look at Avraham and his contending with God ever since God called him away from his native land in chapters 12, verses 1 through 3. That's where Abraham is introduced to us as a major player. So chapter 15 being 3 chapters later. Now I understand there weren't chapter breaks, but still it's a running narrative. It is prose, and we are led to believe that the sequence of events flows the way that we read it. In other words, it happens in succession the way that we're reading it. There's no reason to assume that the narrative has been jumbled and swapped around so that chapter 15 might in reality come before chapter 12 or something like that. The way we read it is the way we should naturally understand it. So, in chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, there in what amounts to a unilateral agreement, we find that HaShem promises to Avraham to increase his offspring beyond numbering. That's the general gist of the covenant that he made with him, the promise. The corresponding covenant ceremony will later be enacted in verses 7 through 20 of chapter 20. 7 through 20 of chapter 15. But leading up to this point and trailing afterwards is what I believe a grammatical clue as to what or whom Avraham actually placed his trust in. In other words, let me just tell you the question I'm proposing to you today. Did Abraham have generic faith in God, or was it a specific objective faith in an attribute of God or a personality of God or a specific revelation of God? Was it simply generic faith in God, such as we might suppose that many people the world over have? For instance, many multiple Jewish people claim to have faith in God, and yet deny any sort of relationship to Jesus or Yeshua. Are we, the Christian church, to assume or understand or allow for their faith in God in a generic sense to be equated to the church's, the Christians, specific and objective faith in Jesus? Are they to be equated? Are they synonymous? Can we say that generic faith in God is equal to objective faith in Jesus, which we in the church know that objective faith in Jesus really is faith in God. It's just that we're placing our objective faith in the Son of God, who has been revealed as very God himself. So that's really the question that underlies the study that we're doing today as well. In Genesis 12:1, going back there, Moshe recalls that Adonai spoke to Avram. Now Moshe's writing to us. Well, he writes to Israel, but we are privy to his writings. And what happens is, if we look at the narrative, I don't want to look at the English, I want to look at the Hebrew. We're going to find some grammatical clues, and they show up in the Hebrew, and in the English they don't show up as well. So allow me to read the Hebrew. So Genesis 12:1 in the Hebrew, where it says Adonai spoke to Avram. I'm going to use the word Adonai for the tetragrammaton name of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. The Hebrew says Vayomer Adonai el Avram. That's Genesis 12:1. Now, if we trace every occurrence where God and Avram interact, we're going to discover something quite interesting. Continuing with our investigation into the Hebrew, HaShem appears to Avram in chapter 12, verse 7, and he appears in chapter 13, verse 14, and speaks to him there. I already read 12:1. Now let me read 12:7. 12:7 reads in the Hebrew, Vayira Adonai el Avram. And God appeared to Avram. And then chapter 13, verse 14, he speaks to him again. So this time it says, Va'adonai amar el Avram. Now again, the syntax is a little different than what we're used to. It says, and the Lord spoke to Avram, whereas in chapter 12, verse 1, it says, and spoke the Lord to. The verb comes first, but in the chapter 13 incident, the noun shows up first. At any rate, that's not that crucial yet. So far, we're just saying that Adonai, or the Lord, shows up. He either appears to Avraham or he speaks to him. But when we arrive at chapter 15, the crucial chapter of our study, the narrative appears quite odd in the Hebrew. Instead of God appearing or speaking to Avram, the first clause of the first verse reads, quote, and I'm going to read the Hebrew for you, and then I'll read the English. The first clause of the first verse reads, Achar hadavarim ha'elech haya davar Adonai el Avram. The English equivalent is, after these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram. Likewise, if we look at verse 4 of this same chapter, chapter 15, in the Hebrew it reads, V'hinei davar ADONAI elaiv lemor. The English equivalent is, and behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, end quote. So, let's stop and exegete.